First of all, we really appreciate y'all giving us time to talk about this community-based organizing that we're doing. Lydia and I are in several organizations in Duluth, working on police accountability, awareness and issues, and trying to, sort through and implement, discussions and potential changes to policing in Duluth. Today, this morning specifically, we're representing the DSA, the Twin Ports Democratic Socialists of America Racial Justice Working Group. And we have been in touch and crafting an alternative, a proposal for an alternative policing model in Duluth, which we would like to tell you about. So if it's okay, I'm going to hop over to a quick PowerPoint, okay? And then I have some questions at the end of the PowerPoint, but really at any, I know this is semi-informal, so at any time, if you need me to stop, you want to ask questions, we can totally do that. All right. Lydia, do you want to, and this is Lydia, my coworker on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good introduction. Yeah, thanks for being here. And yeah, let us know if you have any questions. But yeah, otherwise I can pass it over to you, Angel.
So let me minimize all these. Okay, I assume everybody can see my screen. I'm not going to read every slide. Everybody, if you need me to read it, let me know. But I'm going to assume everybody can read it. But to give a little context, in the wake of the George Floyd protests and righteous outrage at events in Minneapolis, and of course, other cities around the country, it has, there was really a big push for change, a feeling in so many communities in the country that we needed a different response to situations like that. And in Eugene, Oregon, with their sister city, Springfield, it turns out that for 30 years, they have been running what's called a CAHOOTS program. So CAHOOTS is Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. And what it is, in essence, are teams of social workers, crisis response, people who've been trained in crisis response, and EMTs are dispatched instead of police to deal with, crises, people that are having crises that need help. Obviously, the people need help. We wouldn't call 911 otherwise. And but they're sent instead of the police because the crisis response might be they need to get to a shelter, or maybe they need transportation to a hospital, or maybe they need any other list of services right there in the moment. But what they don't need necessarily are police showing up to do this. And so they developed, it's kind of funny, their history, CAHOOTS. We were watching a video on this a couple weeks ago, and it was totally sprung out of community, the need for community response to, among other things, hippies that might be having a bad drug trip or some sort of an altercation. And, adding police to the mix with guns just could often escalate the situation, like, to heights that were totally unnecessary. And so these people at the White Bird Clinic came up with this idea of dispatching And so what they did is they handed out, business cards to, they like blanketed the town with these little cards that said, instead of if you don't really need 911, instead of calling 911, call us instead, and we'll do what we can. And so now, 30 years later, they've been totally integrated into the 911 dispatch system. And they answer about, Lydia, correct me if I'm wrong, but they answer about 20% of the 911 calls. Now, we don't mean to say or imply that this is a panacea for all police potential overreaction, but there's 2 points that we want to make. One is that police are often called into a crisis situation for which they might not have training. They might not have the patience. They might be called elsewhere for a real emergency. Maybe that involves guns and stuff. And so this alternative, which lives alongside the policing structure, it helps, sort of move non-violent situations into a more appropriate response. Now, you can see from this quote I have on the page right now, this is a pretty important fact that the police are being called for a variety of societal reasons, including, I'm just going to throw out a very broad term, but that we have over the decades criminalized poverty. And so, and also, lessened health insurance access or healthcare access. I mean, there's just been, we've cut public safety programs, we've cut public service programs. And so this one statistic that it's quite possible that we could cut, police shootings, which, just for the record, are not, they're terrible for the community, police shootings. But we also acknowledge that they're pretty terrible for the police too. Police have talked about being traumatized by, having to shoot someone. And so we feel that it's just kind of long past time that, we need to stop looking in the other direction and kind of wringing our hands and come up with, true alternatives. All right, so I just want to make the point that, again, that these are trained teams. These are paid, people are paid. These are, this is their job. In Eugene, they are fully integrated into the dispatch. Whoever works at the dispatch also has training. Is this a police call, response, or is this should we send CAHOOTS instead? So there's a lot of reasons. There's just a lot of reasons why this is a good idea. It can reduce tension. It can save money. It's very expensive, obviously, to maintain, sort of a full-on 24/7 police force, including the training that they need and the, arms that they carry. And this is, this really can just be a really, really good alternative to supplement or supplant some of the police responses. So here are some statistics from CAHOOTS specifically. Now, I also want to point out that the Whitebird Clinic, which runs CAHOOTS in Eugene, is actually overwhelmed right now with cities around the country reaching out to get training materials, consultation on how to set these up in their own communities. And so, we just feel that Duluth would be just a really, really good place to implement such a system. So it looks, a crisis response alternative team looks different. And we do not, at this point, we're talking about trying to launch a pilot program here in Duluth. We don't know exactly what it will look like. Like I said, in Eugene, it's run by the Whitebird Clinic. In other cities, it's a part of, although, and I understand we do have some embedded social workers in the Duluth Police Department. This would vastly expand the role. So we feel that it's important that it be an independent organization from the police department, but I'm just going to say that there's some places where it's not independent and separate. All right, how is it paid for? Well, that's always the big question when somebody brings up kind of a new idea. There's a couple ways to look at this. Number one, can we really afford to continue policing as we have been doing it? There's been various struggles in Duluth over police in the schools, riot gear, things like that. And so it's, it would be paid for. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it would be paid for probably by funds from the police department. But there are a variety of ways to pay for things like this. And I just want to ask the question, can we afford not to? Can we afford to really maintain the status quo? And obviously, I would say no. We need to figure something out. And so the funding, and we understand here in the Duluth area, dispatch is actually run by the county, and which is separate from the police department. So there's a lot of funding issues and implementation issues that still need to be worked out. What we're trying to do now is to gather community support for such an idea. So here's just a few questions that I wanted to put out there to be incorporated into the consideration. When people are thinking about something like this is, to really kind of search deep. Duluth is there is a large, predominantly white, middle-class population that probably experiences policing very different from others in our community. And so it's important for us to really consider how we experience policing. Another thing to think about is, the size of their budget and, is this what we want? All right. The last thing that I want us to talk about, and I realize I don't have, there's a few things actually. One is, another thing that it's important for people to think about, I think, is what do you think might be motivating crime? Like, what are the root causes of crime? In a time when we have there've been tremendous cut to public services, is it possible that crime is being perpetuated by people who are hungry, by people with mental illnesses, by people who are houseless? And, is it really appropriate to somebody that's sort of stretched thin and in a crisis situation, is it really appropriate to send, armed police when what they really need is some other service that, the police are not, just aren't, I don't mean to imply that they're not able to transport people, but very often, there's de-escalation training that can be offered from a community member. It can look very different coming from a community member as opposed to from the police. Another thing I want to point out is that there are major documented discrepancies right here in St. Louis County about brown and Black people being over-policed or more policed. That can take the form of racial profiling, that can take the form of ticketing or throwing people in jail. There are a much higher percentage of Black and brown people in the St. Louis County Jail than are represented in our communities. So the next thing I just want to talk about too quickly is, what are the things that you can do? And I can send this PowerPoint to Brett afterwards if people would like to look at it and consider it more. But there's a few things that people can actually do. 4 things I have right here. One is organized support for HF 784. And this is going through the House now in the state of Minnesota. And it's named the Philando Castile Omnibus Bill. And it's a proposed piece of legislation that aims to address centuries of inequalities and implicit bias targeting primarily African Americans. HF 784. The next thing that people can do is start talking about alternative policing models. And like I said, let us send you more information on CAHOOTS. There might be other models out there, but this is the one that we feel best, would just be a very good fit for Duluth. The third thing that you can do is put us in front of other organizations that you belong to so that we can continue talking about this, discussing this on a public level, and start just sort of really widening the conversation here in Duluth. I do know, as the population that I mentioned, white, middle-class Duluth, my experience with policing is being stopped one time for speeding, which I was totally guilty of. I was scolded and sent on my way. So I feel that is, and I've lived here almost 4 years, so I feel that that's probably pretty representative of a lot of people's interactions with the police, and that it's incumbent upon us to educate ourselves to the fact that that is not how policing is experienced by brown and Black people, by some brown and Black people in Duluth. So it's really important that we start educating ourselves and considering what role we can play in making this a more equitable town for everybody. The last thing I want to put out there before we move to questions is I would like to make an appeal that people think twice before calling 911. To just consider, is it the police that are needed, really? Or is something else needed? I heard a story the other day of a woman in Duluth that was witnessing some sort of an altercation out on the street, out in front of her house. And she did not call 911. She was able to very quickly assess that what this young woman needed was a taxi ride home. And so she called and paid for the taxi to get that woman home. Of course, we don't know what the follow-up is on that, but the point is, just, really, there's all kinds of reasons to call 911 if you are in crisis, or if you are being harmed, for sure. But there's a lot of reasons, a lot of situations where 911 is not, is probably not warranted. So last thing I want to just point out too is that the DSA's Racial Justice Working Group is one of many organizations that is talking about police accountability in Duluth. And at the bottom of this page, you can see there's a new website, Lean Duluth, which stands for Law Enforcement Accountability Network. And it's a new website, but there's a lot of information that has been put up there, including statistics on policing rates for white and non-white people, also the jail population, the racial breakdown of the jail population. There's also, Lydia and I also work in a larger organization called the Duluth Community Safety Initiative, where there are, in addition for calling for the implementation of a CAHOOTS model, there are other proposals like a racial bias audit of the police department. And one thing I just want to say about that, I respect that there will be resistance to conducting a racial bias audit. And when I'm feeling flippant, I say, if you don't think the police are racist, have the audit done and prove us wrong. I don't think that's what's going to happen. We're not talking about individual bad cops, because in every population, in the US, teachers, bus drivers, grocery store workers, everybody's got bad apples. Bad apples are just part of humanity. But what we are addressing is sort of the fundamental ideas behind policing. And we want to take community safety and public safety back into the hands of the community, and regular people.
Oh, I mean, yeah, good work. Yeah, I'm just excited to hear. I don't know if anyone has any questions or anything. I think that's always, yeah.
Well, I'm just happy to be a part of this presentation with Angel and Lydia. We've been working together for months on the CAHOOTS model, examining it and seeing why it might be a good fit for Duluth. I think, one thing that the CAHOOTS model, it kind of, and as we talk about it, as we share it, as we get as many people knowledgeable about it as we possibly can, it shifts responsibility to community members rather than some set aside institution like the police, right? So people become more responsible for each other, looking out for each other, assessing what's needed. And I think it's just a positive shift away from someone's going to take care of me rather than we all need to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm.